Okay, now for more on Russia stopping gas supplies to Poland and Bulgaria, I'm joined by Matt Smith. Matt is lead oil analyst with Kpler. Matt, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. I want to get right to it. Let's begin by Putin threatened and then followed through. Poland says it's going to be doing okay. It has a lot of gas reserves. Much different situation in Bulgaria. Break it down for us.
Sure. Well, the fortunate situation for both countries, Sean, is that we're in this period now where we've come out of winter. So there's that lesser immediate need in terms of demand. But in terms of their reliance on Russia, as you mentioned there, Bulgaria, 90% dependent upon Russian gas. Poland is about 50%. So in terms of the short term, they're going to have to look from Poland's perspective to pull in LNG imports. They're going to have to look to Germany for spot natural gas to come via pipelines. The same for Bulgaria as well. They're going to have to be looking to Greece, to Turkey to supply them in the short term. Both of these countries had long-term contracts that were coming up at the end of this year. Both were not looking to renew them, but because of that, Russia has accelerated this kind of stopping point to this week, So that's what we've got here. Both countries, Bulgaria and Poland, had longer-term plans to have interconnectors. Poland with Norway and Bulgaria looking to have one coming through from Greece there. And the situation is, at the moment, in the short term, they're left scrambling until the end of the year at least.
Because Putin labeled a number of nations, quote, unfriendly nations, and mandated that they all pay in rubles moving forward. How are other nations threatened by the Kremlin's moves coping? And do you see serious problems ahead? I think that was great insight that we're getting out of winter, so at least a little breathing room.
Yeah, exactly. But we're in this situation here now where there's so many different countries that are still reliant on Russian gas. And indeed, that's why Putin went into Ukraine in the first place, because he knew how reliant Europe was on Russia, and so that he didn't expect there to be some kind of response. Now, here we are sort of 2 months down the line, and these countries are really looking to pivot. And we see that not just in the natural gas side of things, but from the oil and from the product side as well. But in response to this, you've had a spokesman out of the Kremlin saying, this isn't unfriendly actions from these unfriendly countries. And so there is this absolute animosity here. It's really a chess game. Each one is upping the ante, and it feels like that ante is going to only continue to increase in the weeks ahead.
And couple that with the fact the president of the European Commission said Russia is just hurting its own economy. Do you believe in any way that Putin is overplaying his hand at this point?
Yes, potentially. I think really just going back to the invasion of Ukraine, he seemed to think that they would just roll over, they would be over in a matter of days. And so, but given the ego that we're dealing with here with Putin, he's not one to back down. And so if he's not going to back down, there's really only one way that we can go here. It's either they get defeated, the Russians that is, and pushed out of Ukraine, or he just keeps on going to absolutely obliterate the country, which is an absolutely catastrophic situation.
Also, the word blackmail being used by the EU against Putin and Russia. Do you think that's fair? And how is Russia responding? Do you think there are any nations out there that are sympathetic toward him at this point?
In terms of sympathetic nations, you definitely have China aligning still with Russia, still taking a lot of crude still, as you would expect. There's the pipelines in place there in terms of the infrastructure. Same for India as well. And in fact, we've actually seen a strong pickup in crude flows going into India from Russia. And so, as any crisis comes along, there is opportunity. And it seems that India has kind of jumped in there. At the same time as well, you have OPEC. Russia is one of the largest oil producers in the world, along with Saudi Arabia, along with the US as well, but along with other countries in OPEC. And OPEC are very apolitical, and they're not willing to get involved in the politics of things. And so because of that, they are still, somewhat sympathetic and aligned with them, absolutely. And so you have those kind of on Russia's side. But at the same time, too, back to your point there in terms of the blackmail, there's a lot of countries in Europe here who have just had enough of this and feel that they are being blackmailed by the Russians and are pushing back, because that's really the only response that they can do at this time.
Yeah, Matt, a couple of things at play here as well. It's very expensive to run a war, firstly. And what is the state of Russia's economy with the current situation with oil and gas? Could it be close to defaulting on payments?
Well, the challenge is, though, Sean, with those payments is that Russia cannot pay the US debt that it has, or the sterling debt that it has, simply because it has those frozen bank accounts. So it has this kind of grace period at the moment for 30 days. But that grace period is going to be over in early May. And because of that, and because they cannot pay the debt that it has in rubles, it essentially is going to default. But at the same time, too, as you're talking just in terms of flows and revenues on that, if there are some countries that are willing to pay for gas, for oil in rubles, then that is a good thing for for Russia and for the Russian economy, for Putin, because it helps to strengthen the ruble. At the same time, too, as well, these revenues are going to be dropping off in mid-May as you see sort of trading houses starting to pivot away from buying Russian crude, others as well in Europe, and so they're really going to start to feel the pinch in the next month or so, you would think.
Yeah, it sounds like we're entering a very, very interesting time. Matt Smith, lead oil analyst at Kpler, thanks very much.
Thank you.